Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Adam Parker is a detox specialist, podcaster, and speaker. He specializes in stimulating the body's natural self-healing and self-regulating mechanisms by cleansing the body of built-up congestion and toxicity. His main research focus areas are liver health, gut health, parasites, heavy metal exposure, drainage and detox, and hormonal imbalances. Adam works with clients worldwide to identify gaps in their lifestyle and environment that are keeping them sick and unable to live the life they deserve and are meant to live. He is also a certified primal health coach and has a diploma in transformation coaching from Animas Center for Coaching. In addition to educating and guiding his clients on safe and effective detoxification, he also employs proven behavioral change techniques to assist clients in making tiny changes on a daily basis. He is the host of the Ideal Day podcast, where he interviews world-renowned experts on the topics of health, detoxification, nutrition, personal development, and much more. His followers see firsthand how minor changes in their routine and environment have a significant influence on their health, vitality, and well-being. Adam Parker, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, an absolute pleasure to connect with you and really looking forward to jumping into it.
This is going to be a really, really fun chat. I mentioned that you are a speaker and you're a very good one. I'm not a very good one. We've already pitched the first cut of our introduction that's already in the bin. But I absolutely love your content. You have an amazing voice as well, I just have to say. And the only other types of podcasts that I listen to that aren't health related are all Formula One related. And they're all also done by tons of people who live around your parts. So I'm learning to really love the British accent even more.
Oh, that's lovely. And yeah, no, I know there's something about the British accent for you guys over in North America. So however I can get my message out, with an accent or without one, I'm happy to do so.
It's great. It's just endlessly cool for sure. Absolutely love that. You do something on your podcast that I do as well. And I want to call it out because it seems like it would be very simple and it's actually pretty difficult. You did it with your year in review. You've done it a few times, but you did it in your review, it was your 200th episode, where you took the best clips from a bunch of different episodes and sewed them all together. I actually love doing that, but it takes an enormous amount of work because you've got to go back, re-listen, recategorize everything, find out how these clips are going to fit together in a way that makes sense, and then kind of narrate in between. It can be a real challenge, dude. I really respect that.
Thank you. And it's great that talking to a fellow podcaster, you understand it's a lot of work that goes into podcast production. There's finding the right guests that will have a powerful message. It's researching those guests. It's asking the right questions. It's then, the other side of it, making sure it delivers the right message with the editing. And there's so much that goes into it. And those shows, I've done it for the 100th show and also the recent 200th episode. Yeah, it's trying to just distill what I've taken away and what's really impacted me. And really with the show, it's all things health and wellness. And I do it because first and foremost, it's my passion. And I got into it because I just had all this knowledge. And I was like, people need to know all of this amazing stuff. And yeah, it's great when you can condense what I feel is the main takeaways from 100 shows. And from that episode, it's not just health, and there's some of it around subconscious programming, but all of it leads you down one path, which is to be a better version of yourself. So, yeah, I'm glad that you've liked those, and I appreciate the acknowledgement on the work that goes into it.
Yeah, it is a tremendous amount of work. And it's also fun to hear familiar voices, people that we've interviewed on our show as well. And I don't know what the situation is like in England right now, but in America, a trending show on Netflix is a documentary called Live to 100 that's all about the blue zones. And it focuses on all these amazing lifestyle practices and then turns around and promotes a 90 to 98% plant-based diet. And, I look back on all of our episodes, we had tons of content with the Fetkeys, James Connolly, like lots of different people that have talked about the blue zones and what may or may not be true in them. And so I was able to do that same kind of thing where I took all the bits and pieces to make into one kind of episode. So hopefully rather than sending people out to 10 different episodes, they can just hear the one and kind of get an idea and decide for themselves. So I appreciate that approach. And I'm glad you did that. I'm looking forward to more of those in the future. Yeah. It's also important to point out that you have been podcasting since before the pandemic. So that's pretty legit. Most of us started after.
Yeah, no. So when did I start? I think 2018 I started. And I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. But I thought, you know what, I've got a message to get out there. And also I think when I started, I just gave myself a goal of hitting, I think it was like 50. And then you get into a rhythm, and then it gets easier because you can attract better guests and you find your rhythm as a presenter. So no, it's a lovely experience, and it's a great way to connect and meet with people as well. What's interesting, Casey, you're talking about that Netflix documentary. I've just finished watching it as well, and to give my honest thoughts on it, I think a lot of good stuff in that documentary, but there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with because, we were talking before we press records. I'm good friends with a lady called Mary Ruddock, and she studies hunter-gatherer tribes very much under the Weston A. Price kind of umbrella. Amazing human, and I really value her work. And what's interesting is, and this is when I first interviewed her, she used to live in Ikaria in Greece. She lived there. And she talked about the blue zones. And she said the book, The Blue Zones, it captured a lot of what is true about those cultures, but there was a lot of misrepresentation on how they actually live. So, for example, in the questionnaires that they gave them, is like, do you eat red meat? And the local people in the Korea don't consider goat as red meat, but they eat all of the goats. They use every single part of the animal. So if you're watching the documentary that's now on Netflix, they were a closed ecosystem for hundreds of years. Like nothing came off the islands. So they had to utilize every single part of the environment. And that was including the goat. So they would eat everything from the goat. They'd eat the organs, they'd boil the skulls, they'd use the skins. But that documentary kind of left that one out. And I think it was slightly plant-based biased, if I'm honest. And really, I'll be honest, I don't really watch much Netflix anymore because I recently interviewed a chap called Jason Christoff, amazing individual, all about subconscious programming. And a lot of these mainstream media outlets, they put in certain narratives and agendas that suit their wider narrative and agendas. And that one of them is the whole plant-based movement. And I'm not bashing it. If that's what people want to do, that's their choice. But the actual show didn't give an actual representation of Ikaria. So then that made me question, well, right, if I know different, what were the other, I think he went to, is it Okinawa in Japan and some other places. So I enjoyed it. It was entertainment value. But again, with anything on those kind of media channels, I always take it with a pinch of salt because I think, you're in a trance-like state when you're taking in the information, and it can just go straight past our conscious filters and straight into subconscious and take it as truth.
Yeah.
So whenever I watch it with my wife, she hates me for this, but I'm constantly pausing it. I'm like, that's not right. And then I'm just dissecting it the whole time. And she's like, can we just watch it? And I'm like, no.
Same thing happens around here.
Yeah, but do you know what? It was good entertainment. The guy who presented it, the author, he's a very flamboyant, entertaining. You can tell he's meant for camera, and he'd be a great salesman. But yeah, I literally just finished watching it like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. No, I love that very thoughtful bit of opinion about it. I couldn't agree more. I thought it was beautifully done. I really appreciated how close these people were, how much they're moving, how much they value their elders, and how cognitively able they still are. They're playing instruments and dancing, doing all kinds of wonderful things. It was just disproportional to the plant-based message. Like you took out of all of that, the number one thing on any interview I've ever heard with Dan Buettner say is the best thing you should do. The number one thing you should do is do a plant-based diet, which is 90 to 98% plants. And we just listened to the episode with Dr. Bill Schindler on the Plant Free MD podcast. He just got back from Sardinia, which is also a blue zone. Every house they went to, the first thing they would do is pull out all the cured meats. And then he asked one of the locals, like, how many times a week do you eat meat? And they said, like, once a week. He goes, once a week? I've eaten more meat since I've been here than I even eat at home. Like, what are you talking about? And to them, in that language, eat meat means you take an entire pig, the way you're describing, or whatever animal it is and roast the whole thing up and use the whole thing. That's what eating meat means to them. They eat meat every single day. So it's unfortunate that people are going to see how wonderful and beautiful these places are and how wonderful the people are. And the number one thing they're going to think is like plant-based is the best way to go. It's too bad.
Yeah. And then I get friends or new clients that are learning this way of navigating health. And they'll be like, I saw this. So you're saying isn't right. And I'm like, yes, there's a different message there. And it's trying to explain how I got to my conclusion on what I recommend. But the other thing I'd kind of layer over all of this is belief kind of trumps everything, right? Because if you inherently believe in something, you'll make it work in your mind. It won't be great for your health, but I think belief is what drives individuals to do certain diets, right? So I was saying, I don't know if it was on my show I was being interviewed. I was saying, right, a breatharian, right, just consumes breath. Now, in my mind, in my belief system, I'm like, that's not possible. Like, how can someone live? But then there are people that are breatharians, right? So I have to acknowledge where I am with my belief system. I don't kind of get it, but I'm open to talking to someone that lives that way and understanding. And, I could change my opinion at some point. So I always stay open. I'm always open to people's perspectives. So if someone is, a vegan or a diet that doesn't align with me, I'm more than willing to understand and get into their space to understand, right, where are you coming from? What's your perspective? Because ultimately they've landed there because of their belief system. So I think belief is a big part of health. And that's why, when we talk about that documentary on Netflix, getting someone to believe something changes how they do things. So it's all about just getting into their subconscious mind and getting them to believe certain things. So that's why I don't really watch that sort of stuff, and I empower myself to be like, rather than things being placed into my mind, I'm gonna have a bit of a open approach and do my research, then make a decision.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to empowerment. It comes down to taking ownership and doing your own research and finding what aligns with you. Right? If you feel it aligns with what you want to do, then off you go.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. And, for all the content that I've consumed of you and your podcast, which is wonderful, I actually don't know that much about your personal story. And what I can gather is that you have done what you have just talked about. You've tried many, many different things. You've had to go out and learn many different things. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your own personal journey through health. How did you get interested in your own health? Did something happen to your personal health that wasn't great that forced you down that path? Or how did this become of interest to you?
Yeah, Casey, I definitely have a story. So I would say it really started when I turned 30. So coming up to 10 years ago. And typical average guy, lived in the big city, London, going to work, doing what I thought was healthy, so, not eating fatty foods and, just exercise, was just running and eating well. So that was like, I won't go to McDonald's, but I'll go to Chipotle, and thinking I was living a relatively healthy life. And then I would say over a 6-month period, my health really started to decline, and I just couldn't understand what was going on. It kind of happened. It started slowly, then happened all really quickly. So my job was to be front of house sales guy, personable, and that requires a certain level of confidence. That requires a certain level of interpersonal communication. And then all of a sudden, I was getting anxious for no reason, and I'm thinking, why am I feeling anxious? And then all of a sudden, I wasn't able to connect to people's eyes. It was a really weird. These weird behaviors started to emerge where I was just anxious all the time. I'd overthink things, and then I started to create these strategies to avoid certain scenarios because I was like, I just can't deal with it. And that was really interesting because back then there wasn't really this mental health narrative like there is now. And I didn't even know what anxiety was. I honestly, I couldn't put a label on it. I couldn't be like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I just didn't know. So that was interesting. And then my sleep started to play up. I started to lose my hair. So I was getting patches of bald patches in my hair, which I now know is a thyroid issue. So again, what was my coping strategy? Is like, well, I'll just have really short hair so no one can see, right? So I started getting all these different symptoms. And obviously, we're raised in this culture on convenience and quick fixes. So I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to have to really look at what was going on. I wanted to go get a pill and be on my way. And that's what I did. I went to the doctor and they prescribed me, I think it was some form of antidepressant for the anxiety, like in a smaller dose, which I didn't like. I knew even then, I was like, I'm not going there. But for the hair, they were like, just rub this steroid cream on it. So I was like, oh, cool, I'll take the steroid cream. So I did that and yeah, it kind of worked. But the nail in the coffin for me, where I was like, I have to now address this, is when my hormones started to pack up. So overnight, my sex drive just completely disappeared. And I went from, a guy who was very much, that was part of my identity, having a healthy sex drive and being a young man and, being social, to it being completely non-existent. And then I had my blood work done and I had the testosterone of an 80-year-old. And I was like, what is going on? So that got my attention. That's when I finally was like, I have to make some changes and I have to work out what's going on. So that set me on the journey. So it started with, okay, I don't want to go down I even knew back then the allopathic route wasn't something I wanted to do. I knew that because in my mind at the time, I was a healthy guy, right? I was kind of, I'd eat organic when I could and blah, blah, blah. So that sent me down the rabbit hole of, okay, functional medicine is the route. So I started working with practitioners. And I worked with many practitioners, all of which really didn't do much for me. But to give them grace and respect, I learned little bits along the way from all of them. And I'd say I got to like 3 years down the line and haven't really moved the needle. And I was really suffering on many levels physically because I was, I wasn't able to put muscle on. I was anxious and my body wasn't functioning. But also on a mental and emotional level, because I felt like my life had been taken away. I had this enjoyable life and it was gone. And I felt a lot of anger and resentment, like why me, and kind of victim mentality. So that's where it started. And it went for 3.5 years until eventually I then had the mindset shift of, I've got to own this and work it out myself. And there's no one coming to save me. And even though I know functional medicine is a better route, I need to really empower myself and work it out myself. So that mindset shift happens. And when I then landed on really focusing on detoxification, that's when everything changed. Because prior to that, I'd done loads of foundational work. Like I had the Aura Ring, I was sleeping, I changed my diet. So I was eating amazingly well. And I tried all the diets. I did keto, carnivore, paleo, and they all had their kind of incremental improvements, but nothing was the big issue. Individuals of all different modalities. Like so I think with health, we want the quick fix, and we speak to like, oh, it's keto. Keto's the way. Right. Or it's this thing. There is no one thing for health. There's no one like this is it. And I'll be honest, detox isn't the only thing. I think it's a big moving piece now because of the world we live in and the amount of toxins we're exposed to. But it's a holistic approach. But detox was the biggest mover. And then on the flip side, there's no one thing that normally makes you sick. It's an amalgamation of just constant things that build up over many, many years. And eventually your cup is filled and then things start to malfunction and symptoms arise. So I had all the foundations in place from, practitioners and just being really interested in the whole health game. But when I really took the ownership and focused on detox, that's when everything started to shift.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing journey you've been through, man. That's quite a lot. You mentioned all the different diets that you've been on. You've been on every different diet under the sun, it sounds like. I'm curious to know, let's just skip ahead to today. Where have you landed today? What does a normal day of eating look like for you now?
I think one of the best diets that really helped me was the GAPS diet. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride she wrote many books on GAPS. And I actually went and stayed with her on her farm and worked on her farm. But today, where my diet lies, as I said, I think people can live on carnivore, they can live on vegan, they can live on paleo. Where I land and what works for me is trying to eat a diet that is in alignment with how our ancestors used to eat. So when we think about the work of Weston A. Price and understanding that for those who don't know, he was a dentist in the 1930s and he traveled the world for about 10 years and studied all of what they called at the time these primitive cultures, because they were still at that moment literally completely isolated from civilization. They lived off the lands. They were tribes that weren't really interrupted by Western culture at that point. And he studied all of these different tribes all over the world: Alaska, Australia, Switzerland, Scotland, Peru. He went everywhere. And from that, he wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And from that study, he had around 11 principles on what all of these different tribes did, regardless of where they were. And obviously now you've got the Weston A. Price Foundation, which promotes a lot of those dietary behaviors. So really, it's just trying to eat in alignment with how our bodies were designed. So yes, I eat vegetables. Yes, I eat meats. I prepare the vegetables correctly. So a lot of these tribes would prepare the vegetables and the legumes, for example, in a way that would make them safe to eat. So removing the anti-nutrients from those foods. They would eat a lot. They'd eat all of the animal. They would have fermented food. They would consume clay, which is a form of a binder. So really, I try and fit around that model. And if I'm honest, it's like how our grandmas and great grandmas used to eat. It's really simple. It's, don't eat too much, eat a variety of plants, eat some meats, eat ferments is a real big mover in terms of health. Once you've fixed your gut, because ferments can be high in histamine. So if you've got a damaged gut, it can actually flare things up. But once you've healed and sealed the gut, fermented foods is amazing for overall health. Absolutely amazing. You will, if you add in ferments every single day, just a condiment size, you will never get sick. You will never get sick because it has so many benefits to the body. So yeah, I just try and eat in alignment with that kind of traditional way of eating. And look, I'm human. We live in a world of so much abundance, and a lot of it isn't healthy for you. So I'm not saying I'm holier than thou when I never go to a restaurant or I don't eat. So I do. Why not? We got to live life. But I understand the downsides of those foods, and I treat them as such as they're treats and they're one-offs. And I also, prepare my body for it. If I'm going to have burger and fries on occasion, I'll probably take some activated charcoal with me before, and just prepare myself for it rather than that being the norm. Because the norm now is, Uber Eats. I've been too busy, convenience, and it's become like pop culture. It's culturally cool to consume these foods as part of your normal diet. So I don't view nutrition like that. I view it as, yes, I will indulge in those things as and when I feel like, but it's not part of my my standards operating when it comes to my diet. Because I think that's important, because we can't, I think the term's like orthorexic, where it's like, I can't, and I was this at one point. I want to really emphasize this. When my digestion was ruined, and that was, I forgot to mention that, I had terrible digestion. That was another thing that was really bad. But I got to a point on my journey where I was like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't, and it was like this controlling behavior, because if I restricted everything, I wouldn't have bad digestion, and I felt some form of control over this thing that I had no control over, these symptoms and this condition. So it's important to live a little once you've healed the gut, and because otherwise you just feel restricted the whole time. So there's balance. I would say I'm 95% eating healthy, 5% indulgence, as it were.
Nice. No, that sounds great. That sounds very reasonable. And you mentioned, your area of expertise, which is detoxification. And you mentioned that that's not everything. And you're right. Like, that's not the whole picture. I promote the carnivore diet. I like the carnivore diet. I think it really works for me. I'm not saying that everybody has to do it all the time. It's just like at some point, like if you like every single car, you'll never buy a car. Like at some point, you've got to buy a certain car and say, this is a car that I like. And whatever gets you from point A to point B is totally valid. So the episode that you did on fermentation, I thought was fantastic, and eating ferments. And as somebody who does practice a carnivore diet, I don't eat them. I just don't. I don't have a problem with them. I don't think they're unhealthy. I know they're super healthy. Would you be concerned with somebody like me or somebody else who is eating a more carnivorous diet and is just like by the nature, they're just not eating it? It's not that they think it's bad. It's just that it's not around and they don't eat it. Could they be benefited from adding that in even just a little bit?
Yeah, I think ferments are amazing. And again, I look back at culturally, we had to eat fermented food because that was our refrigeration process, right? We had to preserve the food somehow. And that's how we were able to preserve food in the winter. But, with any of these diets, we're all different individuals. So, whatever works for the individual, I say if it works, then go for it. I love the carnivore diet. I've done it many a time. And I saw some amazing benefits from it. And, ultimately people are focused on health and they find something that works for them. So, paleo, again, it's a great diet. And it's just finding what works for the individual. Because I think we all have, slightly different nuance in our biology and our genetics and what works. And it's just finding that sweet spot for us. And anyone that goes on a journey of healing and finding out what diet works for them, ultimately they're taking ownership, right? And that ownership means they're finding out what works for them. They're not being told by the TV or the latest this, that, the other. So with ferments, I think it can add value to anyone as long as their guts are healed. And, the amount of nutrition that you can get in sauerkraut, for example, it's 10 times more vitamin C than in cabbage. A ferment that I'm really loving right now is natto. And that is fermented soybeans. And that has the highest amount of K2, so vitamin K2, which was, the work of Weston A. Price. He didn't know what it was at the time, but he called it the X factor. So ultimately, ferments are great because they have high levels of vitamins, but also they have healthy microbes as well. So it's good for the microbiome balance. And it's not, ferments are something that they just work in the background. It's not, I think we all want, I did this and oh my God, I feel amazing. It's like you want that kind of shock, wow factor. Ferments don't give you that. Ferments are like, slow and steady wins the race. They'll just tick along in the backgrounds, working on your digestion, working on your immunity. There's so many good tricks you can do. If you have lacto fermented vegetables, for example, so I love fermenting carrots, and you ferment it in salt and water, and that creates a brine. And that brine then also becomes full of probiotics. And it's such a good hack. If you're feeling sick or you've got stomach troubles, you can just drink some of that liquid and it clears it straight away. So again, it's just another tool that we can have in the toolbox when we're looking at health. But then I know loads of healthy people that don't go near ferment. So it really just depends on our biology and what works for us. And for me, it's something that I will never stop doing. I have ferments every single day, and I really enjoy them. I think they add to my health, and they're really enjoyable as well. And then you've got kefir or kefir. That's an absolute powerhouse. That's more of an animal-based ferment. So you'd have kefir grains. You can buy kefir in the store, but again, it's processed and it lacks the amount of micro or biodiversity of microbes. But if you make it yourself, and then you double ferment it with a fruit. I mean, the amount of B vitamins and nutrition, that all the vitamins and minerals, is amazing in kefir. So that's the superfood as well. So there's many different types of ferments. I'm just always like rotating them and recycling different ones. So I'll do sauerkraut's always a staple, but kefir I'll come in and out of. Natto I'm currently trying, but I'll knock that on the head at some point and then return back to it. But as I said, for me, it's been something that has elevated my health to another level where now I don't even get any kind of flutter of sickness. So before, I might feel something occasionally coming on, then I'd kind of hack it with high dose vitamin C and all of that. I haven't been sick, as in not even felt anything coming on in over 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's and again, when I tap into my intuition, ferments it's the slow and steady wins the race, just in the background working away. Great. So yeah, I think they're great.
Okay, awesome. You have me sold. At the risk of receiving a ton of hate mail from carnivores out there, I'm going to go out today and I will buy some ferments. I will try them and I'll report back to you. You have me sold.
And Casey, the best way to do it is to make them yourself, and it's really easy. I'll send you some links on some people on YouTube showing how to make them, because the challenge that you can get when you buy them. So, for example, you get sauerkraut. If you go to the only place I'd buy sauerkraut would be like a farmer's market, where it's like an independent individual or company that have made it themselves. If you go to a supermarket, the sauerkraut is pasteurized. The kefir is also less in terms of quality, in terms of the biodiversity and the milk they use pasteurized milk, not raw milk. So the best thing to do is to make it. But if you can't, go to a farmer's market, and those companies or individuals should make it in the proper way.
That's a really good tip. Yeah, I was just thinking too, like I always try to make my own. When I do sauerkraut, I haven't done it in a few years, but when I do, I always try to just buy all the cabbages myself and use salt. The last time I tried to ferment, I did kimchi, and I chose this recipe that had all kinds of like exotic ingredients. I ended up stopping at like 3 different stores and like threw away tons of waste from the foods that I wasn't able to use. And so I just need to go back to doing something more simple like sauerkraut, like you said, and make that at home. So yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I think that's a smart thing that anybody consider, and just kind of see how they feel. And that really brings us, I think, to your kind of wheelhouse topic, which we've mentioned several times, which is detoxification. And I have to say, I kind of think of this almost the way I think about the problem with oxalates. It's either that it's not that big of a deal for most people, or it's kind of a little bit of a big deal for everybody. And since it's so ubiquitous, none of us really think about it being such a big problem. What do you think about that?
So I think it's a problem for everyone, but do symptoms manifest in everyone so severely that they want to take some action on it? So, for example, if you have to drink a coffee every morning, if you have fatigue at the end of the day, if you're getting random skin issues, if your digestion isn't too great, if you just don't have that zest and vigor that you had when you're in your 20s, that is all forms of toxicity within the body. And again, culturally, we put it down to, well, I'm just getting old, and it's not. I mean, I'm 39. I'm soon turning 40. I'm in better health now than I was in my 20s. So culturally, we're told, oh, you're just getting old, and things are harder and slower as you get old. I would say it's there's obviously an element to that. I think when you're younger, you have more life force, but that shouldn't stop you having less energy and hard to lose, like that stubborn belly weight that's harder to lose, and it's harder to put on muscle. All of that, in my opinion, comes down to how well your body is functioning. And if you have a clean vessel, your body will function correctly. Your hormones will function correctly. Your digestion will function correctly. And all of the things that we just take as normal, like I need my coffee. And again, coffee is again a cultural status now. Like everyone, has to have their coffee in the morning. And I gave up coffee, and that was tough. But since I gave it up, I've never looked back. Normal culture says that it's harder to do things as we get old, and it is the way it is. But actually, I've seen you can reverse aging by detoxification, along with the other lifestyle habits that I discuss, and you can be extremely healthy into your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And really the crux of it is we live in a very toxic environment, and more so than we ever have done. So I got sick in my 30s or 30. Now I'm seeing people that are sick. I was chatting to a neighbor randomly yesterday, and his 17-year-old daughter has fatigue and chronic issues. And so I'm seeing it younger and younger and younger. A lot of the people that I work with are, young guys in their 20s who are suffering. And I think, well, why is that? And it's because their body burden is more than it was when I was born. There's more vaccinations, there's more chemicals in the environment, there's more heavy metals. And then you think about the mother and the microbiome she had, passing that on to her offspring. As we get sicker and sicker and our microbiomes are more and more disrupted, you can only pass on what you've got. And this is a lot of the work of Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride and the GAPS diet, saying, if you're going to conceive, you've got to really detoxify and heal your guts, because you can only pass on what you've got. So I think a lot of people are getting sicker younger. But again, the world we live in, that's kind of normalized, not feeling great. And also there's loads of quick fixes. There's stimulants wherever you look that can just prop you up and keep you going. And it's only when people really start to malfunction is when they really, and they accept, I can no longer get by, and the conveniences of going to the doctor or taking this, even a supplement, aren't working for me anymore. That's when they then look to functional medicine, and hopefully they end up with looking at detoxification, because, as I said, there's no magic bullet. Detoxification isn't a standalone thing. You've got to fix your sleep. You've got to fix your diet. You've got to fix your community. There's all these different things. But because of the environment that we now live in, toxicity and being toxic normally is the biggest heavy hitting item that you've got to tackle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is where the conversation usually gets very nuanced and complicated. And there's lots of different things. Like you said, there's no one magic bullet. So if people are suffering through this, they need to contact somebody like you, who's an expert in some of this stuff. But my question to you would be, first of all, how would somebody know that they need to start addressing this? Like, it sounds like it's kind of like just general, not feeling great, getting sick all the time, maybe brain fog or something of that nature. And then the second part of that question is, maybe we can start to talk about some of the solutions that you've found to be able to help people. And they're all over the place. They could be for lots of different things, but maybe we could think about it as far as like, what are the easier or the less expensive things to tackle first? And then we could get, kind of more and more into the weeds of other things that we could try. Maybe if you've got the means, or a little bit more complicated, you might need like more time or resources for.
Yeah, sure. So really, and obviously I'm biased because I'm a detox expert. Any health ailments, there's a level of toxicity involved. And everyone can benefit from detox practices. And here's the thing, we do a lot of them without even knowing, right? So, I would say walking is a detox practice. You're moving the lymph. Drinking good quality water is a detox practice because you're flushing out the body. We are naturally detoxing, whether we like it or not. It's part of our bodily functions. The body is constantly cleansing itself. If you think of our body like a house. If you go shopping and you bring home food, you don't absorb all of that food. Like you'll have some vegetables and you'll take some of the rough cuts off. There might be some bits that left over from dinner. Then you've got all the plastic packaging. So even though you bring in nutrition or energy, there's still waste products, right? So we naturally create waste products. That's why we poop and we pee and we sweat. But then on top of that, we've got all of the other toxicity in our environment now, which is unprecedented in all of human history. So, some stats like there's been over 80,000 synthetic chemicals released into the environment in the last 50 years, most of which don't get tested. They just get released into the environment. I think there's 2.2 billion tons of heavy metals mined every year. And then on top of that, EMFs is the new bad boy in town, where 20 years ago, I don't know, it was probably like 2G. We didn't even know what Gs were back then, right? But we kind of remember 3 and then 4, and that plays a big part in our health as well. And when I reflect on my childhood, I have such gratitude to have grown up in the era that I grew up in, because there was this electro smog that we now live in. I wasn't exposed to that, so I kind of had a good start in life to build my immune system. So there's so much going on. So in general, if you're not feeling your best, it's easy to put it down to I'm getting old, or I'm not sleeping enough. And again, there's so many other areas that we need to look at. But in general, we're always detoxing, and if we can aid the body in that process, it's only going to benefit how we feel.
That's amazing. So what are your favorite practices?
So there's some easy kind of entry level things you can do. What I do is I take clients through a step-by-step process, because you can, without the right knowledge and understanding, you can actually run into some challenges and can harm yourself detoxing. For example, if someone figures out they're heavy metal toxic, if they just jump into a heavy metal detox, you can really injure yourself, because you can release these heavy metals from wherever they're kind of locked up, and then they just redistribute in the body, and then you can even worsen your symptoms. So I take clients through a step-by-step process to remove the toxins in the right order. But you can just do some real easy kind of light lifting detox strategies. So one of them is sauna, and that can be incorporated. I have an infrared sauna, but you don't have to buy an infrared. You can actually buy really cheap, accessible infrared blankets and home saunas for really decent prices today. But you don't have to do that. You can, when you go to the gym, just pop in the sauna 20 minutes afterwards. That it's as easy as that. And sauna has been used traditionally for hundreds of years, for all different cultures. I went to Finland about 2 years ago. There was a conference called the Biohacker Summit that I was attending, and they call it sauna in Finland. And there's more saunas in Finland than there are individuals. So it's part of their culture and super healthy for you. And there was a recent study that I saw that if you were to sauna 5 days a week, you reduce all-cause mortality by up to 40%.
Wow.
It's insane.
Wow.
Because it's a cardiovascular workout. You're sweating out all of the toxicity in the body. So sauna is really like super easy. Just bake it into a workout. And if you can't sauna, sweat. So working out, getting out in the sun, anything that gets the body to sweat, because that's a great detoxification pathway that we can use to rid ourselves of toxicity. The main one is the liver and the colon, but again, the body is has infinite intelligence, and it finds all weird and wonderful ways to cleanse ourselves. So through the skin is a really effective way to get into detoxifying. Other ways that I talk about, this is a real big one. This is minerals and taking minerals to detox. So again, if we go back to our grandmas and our great grandmas, this wasn't a thing, right? Because we were in a low toxic environment, and the food had an abundance of minerals, trace minerals, macro minerals. So I'm sure your listeners are into the health scene, and they would have heard stats like a carrot today had a tenth of the vitamin A that a carrot 50 years ago had. And there's real truth to that. And the reason is because of the monocropping and the way the farming practices now done, and a lot of the plants are sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. So as a result, there's less minerals in the foods. At the same time, there are now more heavy metals in the air, in the water, in our cosmetic products. They're everywhere. So what happens is those heavy metals will bind to the cell receptor sites where minerals like to bind. So the body, again, will utilize what it has. So for example, if there's not enough zinc in the body, it will use cadmium, and cadmium is from smoking. It doesn't want to, but if it's that's the only thing that's available. So when we increase our mineral intake, we flush out those heavy metals naturally, because the body now is like, oh, great, there's minerals here, so I can function. And really see minerals as like the spark plug of our metabolism. You know, a lot of people who have severe constipation is normally a mineral issue. And you think, well, why is that? Well, minerals hydrate our cells. And obviously we need water, but the water can't get into the cell without minerals. So when we start increasing our mineral intake, you hydrate better. And when you hydrate your body, then your colon is able to be more hydrated, because constipation is there's lack of water in the colon, because water's pulled out the colon, large intestine, to be reused. But when we're more hydrated, that normally solves constipation issues. It's not the only thing, but it's a big moving piece. So increasing mineral intake is really important. This can be done through trace minerals, supplements, but the best way I like to approach it is through food. So eating organic. There's more minerals and vitamins in organic food. Eating more organs, so animal organs, is a really good way of increasing your mineral intake. Sea vegetables like kelp are really good as well. So there's loads of natural ways of doing it. But again, that will automatically detox you, because then once the body has the minerals, and also unrefined sea salt, that's a big easy win as well. But once the body is flooded with these minerals, it says to itself, right, I can start releasing these metals and I can start utilizing these minerals. And whatever it doesn't need to utilize, it will just pee out. So increasing minerals is really important. And most people, if they're not really focused on their mineral status, are normally deficient in minerals, because I don't think you can get, if you have the standard American diet, 100% you are deficient in some minerals. Yep. So minerals is a real easy win as well. Just changing up your dietary habits. And I would say another thing is around making sure you poop at least once a day. Again, if we look at culture and you look at, I mean, I view this for entertainment value, but look at like the Daily Mail online. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense what they come out with. But they'll have experts on there saying it's okay to poop once every 3 days. It's like, no, it's not. It is not okay. You should. But then the other side of it, it's like you'll hear some health folk who say you've got to poop 3 times a day, and I think that can be a hard feat to get to. You know, if you're pooping once or twice a day, I think you're in a real good spot. So, you know, how do we get there? It's about eating the right foods. You can, you know, moving into more advanced techniques, you can do enemas if you're struggling. But again, if you're taking minerals and you're eating good food and good vegetables and meats and ferments, you'll be going to the toilet every single day without trouble. So they're real easy entry level things. Walking as well, that's a real good way. Exercise, weightlifting. So again, this is a lot of stuff that people do, but when you focus on it and look at it through a detoxification lens and you give it more energy, you can really help your general detoxification.
That's amazing. No, there's some really good practical tips in for our listeners there. So I really do appreciate that. And just to reiterate, saunas, man, we got a sauna last year. We have a very small home. It barely fit. We moved things. We got rid of things. We made sure it was in there. I've used it every single day since the day we got it. It's amazing. For the listener, if it seems cost prohibitive, start saving up, start doing some research. There's portable ones or blankets, like you're saying. Like it has helped my sleep so much. It's absolutely wonderful. My wife loves it in the wintertime when it gets cold and dark around here. It really helps her stay up and bright with everything and get some warmth. And so I can't say enough about the sauna as well. So again, thank you for
Amazing.
that kind of like a mini guide to the things that we can be doing, on our own. And I love that they are things that maybe we're just not aware of when we can just increase, like you said, like increasing salt could be one that's really, really great. Man, I've been so excited to ask you this question. What are 3 tips you can give to our listener to help create the ideal day?
Oh, wow. So I would say, firstly, have a lens on detoxification for health. It's so easy to think it's the latest supplement or it's the latest biohack, and they all have value in their own rights. But you can really move the needle when you focus on getting toxins out of you and understanding the amount of toxins in the environment. There's a great book called Fatal Conveniences by Darren O'Lean. I've recently just had him on my show. That really paints a picture of what we're now dealing with within our culture. So just having a lens on how I can just be always detoxing. So that, as I said, going for a walk or a sauna or eating better, all you're doing is just giving the body what it needs to cleanse itself better. So all the stuff that we do, it's the body that heals itself. It's the body that is able to have supreme health when it's given the right conditions. So having a lens on detox is one. I would say the other one is around understanding that we need to be empowered in how we use our minds and how we think, and realizing that we have to really tailor the content we consume, because everything's vibration, everything is energy, everything's vibration. And when you consume certain music or television shows or mainstream media, how do you feel walking away from that experience? If you're feeling guilt, shame, anger, frustration, that's the vibration it's put you in. You want to consume things that uplift you and give you optimism, hope, joy. So you can decide what you take in. So focus on uplifting music, on podcasts that are inspirational, on, I'd say movies, but a lot of movies have kind of subliminal messages in there. But anything that gives you that good energy, that good vibration. Because ultimately, what the vibration you're in, you will attract to you what you are. So if you're like misery guts, you're just going to attract people that are miserable. I mean, and we know this, right? When you're, we've all been in a situation where you're chatting to someone and you're like, oh my goodness, they're draining my energy, they're so negative, and you want to get away from them, right? Because you can feel the energy. Whereas when you're in an uplifted energy, you attract to you people of a similar vibration. And that's when amazing things happen. So really focusing on what you're consuming to get you into the right states, I think is super important. Because then, people say, oh, that person was lucky. I'm like, no, they brought that to them because of the vibration that they're on. And then I'd say the final thing would be around really value your health in general, because when you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Like if you want to be successful in whatever you do, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to crush it, or your focus is around, charitable work and giving back and making a difference, making an impact, whatever it is that gets you up in the morning, whatever drives you, if you don't have your health, you can't sustain, you don't have anything. And ultimately you want to be able to enjoy whatever gift you have for this world. You want to be able to enjoy it and you want to be able to share it with people. So really, really have a focus on your health, because I think, again, today in culture, people are more focused on money than they are health. And I understand that, because there's the fear of, if I don't have money, then I don't have freedom and I lose access to things and I'll be on the streets or whatever goes through people's heads. But when you realize, when you have your health dialed in, what you can achieve in your life is amazing compared to what you could achieve just being subpar. Like you'll 10x your achievements, whether you're there to spread a message, whether you're there to make loads of money, whether you're there to whatever cause you are about, whatever you wake up for. When you've got your health, you'll 10x your results. And I say that from my experience, and I also say that from people I've worked with. When people have a passion, they have a vision, and when they've removed all of the blockers, the vessel's clean, they can achieve so much more. So just changing that lens of being health focused first, because then you can give back to your friends, your community, and you can do what you were put on this earth to do so much better.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I love taking other podcasters' signature questions and putting it back on them. So I love those answers. Yeah. Adam, this has been such a fun chat. I've really learned a lot, and I think our listeners will take a ton out of this. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Amazing. Casey, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been great. It's been a high vibration chat. So thank you. So people can connect with me via Instagram. So my handle is at Ideal Day Adam. My podcast is the Ideal Day Podcast, so they can check that out. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and where all good podcasts are hosted. And they can check out my website, which is youridealday.com.
Excellent. We will tag all of those in the show notes. Adam Parker, again, thank you so very much for coming on our show and educating us all about detoxification and about your own health journey. Gotta say, too, I'm about to turn 40 in a few months, so let's absolutely celebrate turning 40 and feeling the best we've ever felt in our lives. It's pretty cool to be able to say that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, happy birthday for when that time comes. I've got 6 months to go. And listen, I feel like I'm only just getting started. And in my mind, I keep thinking, I want to redefine what 40 is. I want to redefine what that's about in culture, because I think you can have amazing health, all the way into your 90s. It's all doable. So yeah, I love that, and let's stay connected on when we're both in our 40s for sure.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm turning 40 in 3 months, so I'll cross that threshold before you will. So I'll let you know if the wheels just start falling off. But either way, Adam Parker, thank you so very much. This was a wonderful conversation, and we love your content. So thank you so very much for coming on our show today. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. I know I say this all the time, but I really do mean it. It has been such a joy to make and produce this podcast and to watch it grow. Our business started in the pandemic in July of 2020, and we started the podcast in October of 2020. So it has been 3 years now, and to see that we have generated over 400,000 downloads worldwide is just simply unbelievable to me. This year in particular has been such a blast to travel to different health conferences and not only meet some of our amazing guests, but also to meet many of you, our listeners and supporters. We really just can't thank you enough. As always, feel free to book a complimentary 30-minute session on our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. On our homepage, there is a Book Now button where you can find a time to speak with us about health, fitness, nutrition, whatever you like. We've loved chatting with people all over the world and many of you out there to bounce ideas off each other or to try to come up with plans to achieve specific goals, or even if it's just to reach out to introduce yourselves, we would just love to meet you and connect with you there. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch these full interviews, and also the shorter interviews on more specific topics that are taken from these full interviews. We've gotten really good feedback over there. It's also a really fun way to interact with people who comment. We read and reply to every single YouTube comment we get. So head on over there if you want to start a conversation and watch these videos. As always, if you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. It really is the best way to make sure this podcast gets out there to more listeners. We've been able to keep Boundless Body Radio ad-free for 3 years and really want to continue to do so. And so your 5-star ratings and reviews are the best way to support us at Boundless Body and support the podcast. Cheers. Thank you again so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio.